He is not the janitor you think he is, and in exactly 5 minutes this entire building will obey his voice. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then twice, casting long shadows across the empty marble lobby as Sophie Bennett dragged her cleaning cart past the security desk. It was just after midnight, the kind of hour when even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. The elevators had stopped responding 10 minutes ago, and the silence felt wrong, too heavy, like the building itself was watching her. She tightened her grip on the handle of the cart, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. Then she saw him. A man in a dark maintenance uniform stood near the control panel, sleeves rolled up, one hand resting casually on a keypad like he owned it. Sophie exhaled, relieved. Finally, someone useful. "Hey," she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Can you fix the elevators or something, because I'm not spending the night stuck in here." The man turned slowly. His expression was calm, unreadable, almost too composed for someone working a midnight shift. For a brief second, something about him did not fit, but Sophie brushed it off. To her, he was just another janitor. Before we continue, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. He studied her for a moment, eyes sharp under the dim light, then gave a small nod as if considering her request rather than obeying it. Sophie frowned, crossing her arms. Seriously, she added, "I have been here since 6 in the evening, and I still have another floor to finish. So if you could just do your job, that would be great." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile. Instead of answering, he pressed a sequence on the panel with deliberate precision. Sophie blinked. "Wait, how do you even know that code?" "Maintenance access," he said quietly. His voice was smooth, controlled, carrying a weight that made her hesitate for the first time. Still, she shrugged it off. "Figures. You guys always have secret tricks." A low hum suddenly filled the air as lights in the hallway beyond flickered back to life. Sophie let out a breath. Finally, she pushed her cart forward, then paused when she noticed he had not moved. "You coming or what?" she asked, glancing back. For a split second, his gaze shifted toward the ceiling cameras, calculating, almost predatory. Then he looked back at her, calm again. "You should stay close," he said. Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. Stay close. It did not sound like advice. It sounded like a command. The hum in the hallway grew louder, like something deep inside the building had just awakened. Sophie hesitated, her hand still gripping the edge of her cart, eyes narrowing as she studied him more carefully. Something about the way he stood there, completely still while everything else seemed to shift around him, made her uneasy. Usually maintenance guys moved fast, talked fast, complained about broken systems or long shifts. This one did none of that. He just watched. "You always this dramatic, or is tonight special?" she asked, trying to shake off the strange feeling creeping up her spine. The man did not answer right away. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, listening to something she could not hear. Then he stepped forward, closing the distance between them with quiet confidence. The air seemed to tighten. "The system is not malfunctioning," he said calmly. Sophie blinked. "What do you mean it is not malfunctioning?" "The elevators are dead and the doors are locking by themselves." "That sounds like a problem to me." He held her gaze, steady and unflinching. "It sounds like a response." The words landed heavier than she expected. A response to what? Before he could answer, a sharp click echoed down the corridor behind them. Both of them turned. A metal security door at the far end of the hallway slid shut with a loud, final thud. Sophie felt her stomach drop. "Okay, that is not normal," she muttered, taking a step closer to him without realizing it. Another click followed, then another, like a chain reaction spreading through the building. Lights in the distant offices flickered on one by one, casting long strips of pale light across the floor. Sophie looked around, heart starting to pound. "Are they locking us in?" The man did not look surprised. He glanced toward the nearest camera mounted high in the corner, then back at her. "Yes," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "What do you mean, yes? You were saying this is supposed to happen." She allowed a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Great. Fantastic. I am trapped in a building at midnight with a janitor who thinks this is normal. He exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to say. You're not trapped, he replied. Not yet. That did not help. Sophie took a step back, crossing her arms again, but this time it was less attitude and more defense. Not yet is not exactly comforting. Look, I do not know what is going on here, but I just need to finish my shift and get out. I have another job in the morning. I cannot afford to be stuck in some weird lockdown situation. The word job seemed to catch his attention. 2 jobs, she added quickly, almost without thinking. Cleaning here at night and working a breakfast shift at a diner across town. So whatever this is, I really do not have time for it. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not pity, not amusement. Something quieter. Understanding, maybe. Then the building spoke. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the speakers above them, calm and emotionless. Unauthorized access detected. Initiating full security protocol. Sophie froze. Her breath caught in her throat as the words repeated, louder this time, filling every corner of the lobby. Unauthorized access. Her gaze snapped back to him. That is not me, she said quickly, panic rising in her voice. I have a badge. I signed in. I am supposed to be here. He studied her face, as if weighing something invisible. I know, he said. The certainty in his voice only made her more confused. Then who is it? The question hung in the air between them. He did not answer. Instead, he turned and started walking toward the hallway, his movements deliberate, controlled. Sophie stared after him for a second, torn between fear and instinct. Then another metallic slam echoed somewhere above them, followed by the distant sound of running footsteps. That was enough. Hey, wait, she called, abandoning her cart as she hurried after him. You do not just walk away in the middle of whatever this is. He slowed just enough for her to catch up, but he did not stop. Stay close, he repeated. This time, there was no mistaking it. It was not a suggestion. It was a warning. The hallway stretched ahead of them, long and dim, lit only by emergency lights that flickered in uneven intervals. Sophie's footsteps echoed too loudly against the polished floor as she hurried to keep up with him, her breath shallow, her pulse racing faster with every second. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting another door to slam shut behind them, half expecting someone to appear out of the shadows and accuse her of something she did not understand. This was not supposed to be her life. Just a few hours ago, she had been on her knees scrubbing coffee stains out of the conference room carpet, thinking about how she needed to pick up an extra shift this weekend to cover rent. That was her world. Simple, exhausting, predictable. Not this. Not locked doors and mechanical voices, and a stranger who moved like he knew exactly what was happening. You walk like you have done this before, she said, trying to keep her voice steady even as her nerves threatened to unravel. You not slow down. Maybe I have. That answer did not help at all. Sophie shook her head, frustration cutting through her fear. Of course you have, right? Because every janitor just casually strolls through a building that is locking itself down in the middle of the night like it is no big deal. She regretted the words the second they left her mouth, but pride kept her from taking them back. He stopped walking. Just like that. Sophie nearly ran into him. The sudden halt sent a jolt through her, and she stepped back quickly, her heart jumping into her throat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he turned to face her fully. Up close, under the harsh white emergency light, she saw details she had missed before. His uniform was clean, too clean, without the usual stains or wear. His hands, though strong, did not look like they spent hours handling chemicals or equipment. And his eyes, sharp and focused, were not the eyes of someone who followed instructions. They were the eyes of someone who gave them. You should be more careful with your assumptions, he said quietly. There was no anger in his voice, but there was something else. Authority. It settled over the space between them like weight. Sophie swallowed, suddenly aware of how small she felt standing there. Look, she said softer now. I did not mean anything by it. I am just trying to get through the night. I cannot lose this job, or the other one, or the one after that if things keep going the way they are. The words came out faster now, spilling over each other before she could stop them. Rent went up again last month. My manager already cut my hours once. And my car barely runs, so if I miss a shift, I am done. Completely done. She let out a breath, pressing her lips together as if she had said too much. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different. Less tense. More real. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, almost to himself. You keep going anyway, he said. It was not a question. Sophie let out a quiet laugh, tired and dry. What choice do I have? That seemed to land somewhere deeper than she expected. For a brief second, his expression softened, just enough for her to notice. Then the moment was gone. A sharp sound cut through the air. Footsteps. Fast. Coming from somewhere ahead. Sophie froze, her body going rigid as the sound grew louder. Multiple people. Running. Her eyes snapped toward him, fear flashing across her face. That is not normal either, right? This time, he did not answer with words. Instead, he reached out and gently but firmly took her wrist, pulling her toward a narrow side corridor just as a group of uniformed security officers rushed past the main hallway. Sophie barely had time to breathe as he guided her into the shadows, pressing them both against the wall just out of sight. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they would hear it. The officers' voices echoed faintly as they moved past. Check every floor. No one leaves the building. Sophie's eyes widened. No one leaves. Her gaze flicked up to him, questions filling her expression. But he was not looking at her. He was watching the hallway, his focus sharp, calculating, like he was not hiding from them, like he was deciding what to do next. The voices of the security officers faded into the distance, but Sophie did not move. She could still feel the echo of their words pressing against her chest. No one leaves the building. The sentence repeated in her mind, louder each time, until it felt impossible to ignore. Her wrist was still in his hand. She had not even noticed he had not let go. His grip was firm, but not rough, steady in a way that grounded her more than she wanted to admit. Slowly, carefully, he released her, his attention still fixed on the hallway beyond the corner. We cannot stay here, he said under his breath. Sophie nodded quickly, swallowing hard. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Where exactly are we going? He did not answer right away. Instead, he stepped out from the shadows and glanced down both directions of the corridor, calculating precise. Then he turned back to her. There is a service route that bypasses most of the security checkpoints. It will get us to the lower levels. Sophie blinked. Lower levels. Why would we go deeper into the building when they just said no one is allowed to leave? Because the exits will be sealed first, he replied. His tone was calm, almost detached, like he was stating something obvious. Sophie stared at him for a second, trying to process that. Of course. Seal the exits first. That made sense. Too much sense. Which only made everything worse. You sound very sure about that, she said slowly, her eyes narrowing. He met her gaze without hesitation. I am. That was it. No explanation. No hesitation. Just certainty. Sophie felt a flicker of irritation cut through her fear again. Who are you really? The question slipped out before she could stop it. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched just long enough to make her wonder if she had crossed a line. Then he turned away. Someone who does not want you to get hurt, he said. It was not the answer she expected, and somehow it unsettled her more than if he had just brushed her off. Before she could respond, another announcement crackled through the overhead speakers, sharper this time, more urgent. All personnel report to assigned zones. Repeat. All personnel report to assigned zones. They went. Pipes lined the ceiling above them, and the floor beneath their feet vibrated faintly with the building's systems working overtime. Sophie wrapped her arms around herself as they walked, trying to steady her breathing. This place feels like a completely different building, she muttered. It is, he said quietly. She glanced at him. What does that mean? But he did not elaborate. Instead, he stopped in front of a heavy metal door with a keypad beside it. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and entered a sequence of numbers. Sophie watched closely this time, her eyes narrowing. You said maintenance access, right? She leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice. That did not look like maintenance access. That looked like something else. The door clicked. A deep, mechanical sound echoed as the lock disengaged. He pushed it open. Cold air rushed out to meet them. Inside, a dimly lit stairwell spiraled downward into darkness. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to go first. Sophie did not move. Not yet. Her instincts were screaming at her now, louder than before. This was not normal. None of this was normal. And he definitely was not just some janitor. She looked at him, really looked this time, at the way he stood, the way he watched her, the way everything around him seemed to fall into place without effort. You knew this was going to happen, she said quietly. It was not a question. That made her uneasy. Each step they took downward rang out against the concrete walls, their footsteps bouncing back at them in uneven rhythm. Sophie kept one hand lightly against the railing, her fingers tense, her eyes adjusting to the dim emergency lights that glowed faintly along the walls. She tried not to think about how far down they were going, but after what felt like too many flights, she could not help it. How deep does this place go? She asked quietly, her voice softer now, less defensive, more cautious. He was a step behind her, his presence steady, controlled. Deeper than most people realize, he answered. That was not reassuring. Sophie let out a slow breath, shaking her head slightly. Of course it is. Why would anything about tonight be simple? They continued downward, the hum of machinery growing louder with each level. It was not just background noise anymore. It pulsed through the walls, low and constant, like the building had a heartbeat. Sophie's mind raced as she tried to piece things together. Sudden sound cut through the corridor. A distant door slamming shut. Then another, closer this time. Sophie's head snapped toward the noise, her body going rigid. They're coming down here too, she whispered. He did not look surprised. He looked ready. Stay behind me, he said. The words came sharper now, more direct, leaving no room for argument. Sophie did not argue. She stepped closer without thinking, her earlier confidence completely gone. Her eyes flicked between him and the corridor ahead, her mind racing with questions she did not know how to ask. Why are they looking for me? She said it quietly, almost to herself, but he heard it. Because you're not supposed to be here, he replied. That answer hit harder than she expected. I work here, she said quickly, her voice rising slightly. I have a badge. Steadily across the underground corridor, casting long shadows that stretched and shrank with each flicker. What is going on? Another officer stepped forward, his hand hovering near his radio. Unauthorized personnel in restricted zone, he said. Sophie felt the words crash over her. Unauthorized. Restricted. They were talking about her, like she did not belong anywhere in this building at all. That was when she realized something even worse. They were not even looking at him. Not really. Their attention stayed on her, their focus locked, as if he did not matter. As if he was exactly what she had thought he was. Invisible. She turned toward him, desperation flashing in her eyes. Say something, she whispered urgently. Tell them. But he did not speak right away. He did not step forward. He did not explain. Instead, he simply watched, his expression calm, unreadable, as the situation tightened around her. For a brief, terrifying moment, Sophie felt completely alone. One of the officers took another step closer. Put your hands where we can see them, he said. Sophie hesitated, her mind racing, fear and confusion tangling together until she could barely think. This cannot be happening. Not like this. Not over something she did not even understand. Her hands slowly lifted, her movements stiff, uncertain. I did nothing, she said, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. I swear. The officer's gaze did not soften. Everyone says that. The words cut deeper than she expected. She glanced at him again, searching his face for something, anything that would tell her she was not about to be dragged out of here and blamed for something she had nothing to do with. And then she saw it. A shift. Small, subtle, but unmistakable. His posture straightened. Not defensively, not cautiously, commanding. Like a switch had been flipped. The air around him changed. The same man she had been talking to, arguing with, questioning, suddenly felt like someone else entirely. The officer reached for her arm. That was the moment everything stopped. Do not touch her, he said. His voice was no longer quiet. It was controlled, firm, carrying a weight that made every person in that corridor pause. The officer froze mid-motion, his hand inches from Sophie's sleeve. Slowly, he turned his head toward the man he had been ignoring until now. And for the first time, he really looked at him. The silence that followed was not confusion. It was recognition. The silence stretched for one long, unbearable second, thick enough that Sophie could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, fading into the distance just as quickly as they had arrived. And then it was quiet again. Sophie did not speak. She could not. Her mind was still trying to catch up with what she had just seen. Slowly, she lowered her hands, her fingers still trembling slightly. She looked at him differently now. Not as a stranger, not as a janitor, but as someone she clearly did not understand at all. You could have said something earlier, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He did not answer right away. Instead, he watched the corridor for a few seconds longer, making sure the officers were truly gone. Only then did he turn back to her. "Would you have believed me?" he asked. The question landed harder than she expected. Sophie opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The truth sat uncomfortably in her chest. No, she would not have. She had already decided who he was the moment she saw him. And she had been wrong, completely wrong. She let out a slow breath, shaking her head slightly. No, she admitted quietly. A faint expression crossed his face, not quite a smile, but something close to it. That is why I did not say anything. The simplicity of that answer made everything feel heavier. Sophie looked down for a moment, her thoughts spinning, replaying every word she had said to him earlier, every assumption she had made. Then she looked back up. "So who are you, really?" she asked again. This time, there was no accusation in her voice, just uncertainty and curiosity. He held her gaze, his expression steady, unreadable in the dim red light. The alarm continued its slow pulse around them, but in that moment, everything else faded into the background. For a brief second, it felt like the answer might come easily, like he might finally say it. But instead, he glanced past her, his focus shifting once more toward the deeper levels of the building. "That question will have to wait," he said. Sophie frowned slightly, frustration flickering again. Wait for what? His jaw tightened just enough for her to notice. For this to get worse. The words sent a chill through her, sharper than before. As if on cue, the overhead system crackled again, louder this time, more urgent. Security breach escalated. All units respond immediately. Sophie's heart,